Now that we have hopefully established the fact that structured dialogue is better than ad-libbing, we need to determine what the best sales psychology is to build into a structured approach. Well, here it is. We know that when a phone-up calls, they are most probably looking for information. The sales psychology we employ throughout the phone call as the best way for them to get what they want is to employ the assumptive sales psychology. This means we will, in a polite way, assume that the best way for them to get the information they want is to come to the dealership. Everything in this Power Phone-Ups approach is assumptive. We will, in this module and in the next, share with you two strategies that show respect for the phone-up's wishes and shows them that the best way for them to get what they want is to come to the store. Now, here are these two sales strategies that we will apply in an assumptive way to our phone conversation with our phone-ups. Number one, leading the conversation to the point of the appointment. And number two, closing for the appointment. These strategies are simple, but they're direct. In this module, we will focus on leading the conversation to the appointment. Now let's start with this. There is a popular belief that the best technique for leading a conversation when selling, and in our case, example, an appointment, is to answer a question with a question. And it's widely accepted that this technique is fundamental to leading the prospect through any sales process in general. And we agree. But, as with many things, if not used just right, there can be a problem. If not done just right, this strategy can be construed as impolite or even rude. Now, you already know this intuitively because from the time you were 5 years old and your mother said, "Where are you going?" And you said, "Well, why do you want to know?" She said, "Don't talk to me like that. It's rude." Moreover, you sense the impoliteness every day when you call someone on the telephone and say, "May I speak to Mr. Smith, please?" And the person on the other end says, "May I say who's calling, please?" "Well, may I speak to Mr. Smith, please?" "May I say who's calling, please?" What's irritating is not that she asked your name, it's that she didn't even acknowledge your question. Now, what we're saying is that you need a technique that will enable you to lead the call toward the appointment using questions without appearing insensitive to the prospect's questions. So how do you maintain this assumptive leadership without being rude or impolite? It's actually very simple. There are 3 rules for maintaining leadership in working toward setting up and confirming the appointment. Rule number 1. When you answer a prospect's question with a question, first answer or acknowledge their question before you ask yours. Let's take the dealership switchboard operator, for example. Instead of the routine, "May I speak to Mr. Smith, please?" "May I say who's calling?" It sounds something like this. "May I speak to Mr. Smith, please?" "Certainly. Your name, sir?" Or, "May I speak to Mr. Smith, please?" "Yes, ma'am. I'll page him. And your name, please?" Now, it's a very subtle difference in technique, but subtle differences in technique frequently make major differences in results. Answer, or at the very least, acknowledge the question, and then it is okay to ask one of your own. It becomes a pattern. Ask, acknowledge your answer, and ask. Maintain the pattern, and you maintain your leadership role in moving towards setting an appointment. Break the pattern, and you give up leadership. All the responses in the script guide that you're about to learn use this pattern. Now, here's another couple of examples from our dialogue guide. "I'm Alex Nicholas, and your name?" "This unit has white seating. Is that okay?" "Tomorrow's fine. Do you know where the showroom is?" This pattern helps you begin to successfully work toward closing for the appointment by obtaining minor commitments to minor questions. Let's now look at rule number 2. It says after you ask a question, remain silent until you get an answer. And rule number 3 says you can break the silence, but only if you repeat your original question or ask one that's easier to answer. For example, you ask, when would you like to see in Test Drive 1? And the prospect remains silent. According to the rules, you can break the silence in one of 2 ways. You can either ask the question again, Mr. Jones, when do you think you'd like to see in Test Drive 1? Or you can ask one that's a little easier to answer. Well, is 3:15 okay, or is later better? But whether you have to break the silence or not, your basic leadership technique remains the same. Answer or at least acknowledge the prospect's question, then ask him or her one. Now, in summary, this question acknowledge question pattern lets you keep moving toward the close on the appointment. When we get to the session in which we look at the layout of the script guide, you will see how easy and effective these rules are to apply and see great results from. As well, I can promise you that these rules will be practiced multiple times when you do your private practice sessions. We'll see you next module.